Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um podcast da Somos Liverpool, o podcast onde você tem todas as informações, as notícias e todas as visitas possíveis nesse podcast. E hoje, antes de começar a minha apresentação, direi a vocês que é um episódio diferente, um episódio que será em inglês, com uma figura muito importante de Liverpool. Eu vou, então, apresentar o nosso convidado de hoje. And on our musical beginning, a very particular song as we're talking to a guest straight from Liverpool. Today's song is Something's Gotta Give by Jamie Webster. Jamie Webster was born in 1994, is an English folk singer, songwriter, and guitarist from Liverpool, a former electrician who initially sang cover versions in local pubs in Liverpool city centre. In October 2020, his debut album, We Get By, released on Modern Sky UK, reached a peak of number 6 in the UK album charts, and he became the inaugural number 1 artist in the newly formed UK official folk album charts, ahead of Laura Merlin, Kate Rusby, and Levelers. Also in October 2020, Boss, a live album from Webster, singing football songs, charted in the folk charts top 10. The Liverpool Echo named Jamie Webster in the 11th most influential Merseysider in its 2020 Power List. And this song, Something's Gotta Give, presents our guest, Peter Kenny. Peter Kenny is another fanatical Liverpool fan who writes about the idols of the Merseyside Red Club. Peter is a freelance football historian who has been featured on the Football Pink Stand fanzine, the Black Watch, and LFC fanzine. Peter has a master's degree in history and has a keen interest in combining history with a beautiful game. Peter, please say hello to our fans in Brazil.
Is it hola? Is that what I'm supposed to say? Hello. Yeah, my name's Peter Kenny Jones. As you've just said, football historian and writer, but first and foremost, a Liverpool fan. So I think that's why I'm here today. I've obviously just been writing about football and football history for a while, and been a Liverpool fan since I was born. Really, obviously, I go to all the home games. I go away when I can. I was at Madrid, Kiev, Basel, everywhere else that we've been. I've travelled around, and yes, obviously, I think I'm on here today to talk about my first book, which is about Billy Lidell. Obviously, played for Liverpool in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, and went into the 60s as well. So that's why I'm here today, and thanks for having me.
Peter, let me start this interview. And you wrote the latest book about Billy Lidell. Billy Lidell at the 100, a family portrait of a Liverpool icon. Please tell us about this book and about the history from Billy Lidell and Red Icon.
Yeah, so obviously Billy Lidell, he joined Liverpool in 1938. He was born in Scotland, so he came when he was a 16-year-old. So that's when he first came to the club. And obviously the war was kicking off in a couple of years' time, so we didn't have much time before World War II started. So we didn't get a first team game, but he joined it at the same time as Bob Paisley, and they were good friends together, both of them playing for Liverpool. Obviously, then he went through the war, joined the RAF, and went around the world playing football, played in England, Scotland, and then even went to Canada and ended up playing there. And then, obviously, when he came back from the war, it was the first post-war season, which was when Liverpool won the league. So 1946-47, he made his debut in that season again alongside Bob Paisley, and then basically that was unfortunately probably the pinnacle of his career, was his first season, because that's when Liverpool won the league. And then after I went, a few years later was the 1950 FA Cup final when he was instrumental in getting Liverpool into the final then. And then basically he was such a big icon that the team was called Liverpool. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but obviously that's how much the Liverpool fans loved him. the team was literally called the Billy Lidell pool because of how important he was to them all, and they loved him so much. Liverpool weren't very good. They got relegated to the second division, and he still stayed loyal though. He never left, never wanted to go anywhere else. As I say, he was there from 1938 up to 1961, so he was there for an amazing amount of time. When he left, he was a top appearances, top goal scorer. He'd captained the club. Obviously, he'd won the first post-league title. He'd taken the club onto a whole new level. And then when Bill Shankly arrived, he was 36, Billy Lidell, so he was right at the end of his career. Shankly came, and if it wasn't for Billy Lidell, Shankly wouldn't have come to Liverpool because they wouldn't have been in the second division. He made them be good enough to be taken over by the great Bill Shankly, who then obviously went to take them on to the next level. But obviously, if it wasn't for Billy Lidell, there wouldn't be the history of Liverpool, because there wouldn't have been the club for Shankly to build upon, because it's all thanks to how great Billy was.
And Peter, tell to us, how is your relationship with the history about Liverpool players, and since when you have been first for the club, how is your relationship with all of idols from Liverpool?
Yes, obviously, I think as a Liverpool fan, and I think any football fan really, you should appreciate the history of the club that you support, because see that's what came before. If there wasn't for people like Billy Lidell and Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, we wouldn't be supporting the club today, because they wouldn't have won X amount of European Cups. They wouldn't have had the reach to. Obviously, for me to be able to speak to Liverpool fans in Brazil is amazing, because it shows how big the football club is now. They've grown. When Billy started playing, they were a massive club, but they were only in the locality of Liverpool and Merseyside. But obviously, thanks to how big the team is, the fan base grows, and that means you get more international fans. So I think the relationship between a fan and the past should be that you should honour the people that have put you on this pedestal, have got the club to where they are. As I say, I think there was, before Billy, there was probably like Elijah Scott was the first hero. Maybe coming after the first days of Liverpool, and Elijah Scott what left, and then Billy Lidell basically took over his mantle of being the hero, and then obviously you're moving on to players like and managers, like Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley. Then you've got the heroes that come after, up to Kenny Dalglish and then Steven Gerrard. That the line goes back through all those people. There's 7 benches outside Anfield of like the most important people in Liverpool's history. And obviously Elijah Scott, Shankly, Paisley, Lidell, John Barnes, Kenny Dalglish, and Steven Gerrard. They're the 7 people. So for those 7 people, you should at least get to know those people to be a fan of this club, because they are the foundations of this team. And I just think it's really important to learn about the history to appreciate what we've got today and why we're so good today.
And tell us about the city relationship with Liverpool Football Club and the relationship between Billy Lidell and the city of Liverpool.
Yeah, well, I think obviously, as I said, then the name Liverpool, I think it says everything, doesn't it? Really, the fans loved him so much that the team was named after them. So, that it shows 2 things. It shows that the players around him weren't as good as him, and that the fans loved him. And as I say, unfortunately for Billy, but fortunately for the fans, the team wasn't very good, but they had Billy Lidell to build around, so they loved him. It's just, I think it's mad as well, like the fan culture in those days was, he wouldn't get mobbed in the street. People would go and ask for an autograph. They'd say like, "Hello, Mr. Lidell." They wouldn't be like, bombarding them with pictures everywhere. It's much more polite and much more civilized way of supporting the team. But he, no bones about it, he was the man. He was their hero. They used to come and watch the reserve games when he dropped down. The gates would double just because he was playing, because people would happily watch the reserves to watch Billy Lidell play rather than watch the first team, because they knew how important he was for the football club. So that shows really his relationship with them.
Lucas, agora você vai fazer a pergunta e eu vou traduzir para o Peter.
Eu queria saber assim, como ele enxerga a mudança de mentalidade do clube a partir da chegada do Jürgen Klopp no Liverpool.
Peter, how do you view this change in the club's mentality as of Jürgen Klopp's arrival at Liverpool?
Yeah, so just the upturn in success, you mean, since he's arrived, basically, yeah. That's what you're saying, so yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, I think, obviously, Jürgen Klopp's changed the club because I think he understands the history and he understands what the fans want. You know, I think as a fan myself, and I'm sure you agree, he's one of us on the sideline. That's what it feels like. He feels like he's a supporter and he understands us. He has the same ethos. He has the same belief. He loves the fans. He loves everyone getting behind each other, working hard. And I think that's why everyone takes to him so much, because he's so infectious and he's so passionate. And that it's hard not to buy into him. Because my girlfriend's an Everton fan, and even she has to say that she likes Jürgen Klopp because he's just so likable, and you can't help but like him. And you can imagine if he was your boss, never mind just as a football manager, if he was your boss, you'd give 100% every day to make sure that you did your best for him. I think that's what he has. He's just got that infectious, personality, and he's obviously a very good football manager as well.
Daniel, chegou sua hora. Você que é o nosso Pierce, por favor, chegou sua hora.
Eu queria perguntar para o Peter como, se ao escrever sobre uma figura tão importante para a história do Liverpool, se ele teve algum suporte, algum apoio por parte da estrutura do clube.
Peter, returning to your book, when you write about a figure so important to the history of the club, did you receive any support from the club structure, from the FSG or the board directors, someone from Liverpool Football Club?
Yes, not from the board or anything, but I did speak to the club, so I sent a few emails in, and they've helped me with a few pictures, a few club documents and stuff they've sent over, which was obviously helpful for me to use. And I think obviously the main thing was they put me in touch with a former player called Alan Banks. He only played 5-6 times for Liverpool in the 60s, but obviously they got me in touch with him, and then because of that, I then tried to speak to as many ex-players as I could. So, fortunately, I've been able to speak to Jamie Carragher, Alan Hansen, Ian Callaghan, and then there's been a lot of other players. There's Gordon Wallace, Jimmy Melia, and let me just try to think what else I've got. Johnny Morrissey, Gordon Milne, Keith Birkinshaw, George Scott, and Alex South. So basically, they just helped me get in touch with a few ex-players, and obviously that helps getting to know the full picture of Billy Lidell if you speak to his teammates as well.
Peter, Lidell is one of the many Scottish idols in Liverpool history. What is the reason for this so recurrent relationship between the club and the players from Scotland?
Yeah, well, I think obviously it all goes back to day one of Liverpool Football Club. Obviously, the first game we ever had was the famous team of Max. So, the first game Liverpool had, all 11 players were from Scotland. The whole team was Scottish. So that's obviously a really far back, tradition between them. But a good reason is that Scotland isn't very far away, which helps. Obviously, people don't want to travel that far. So that's a big reason why Scottish people would want to come to Liverpool. But I think, obviously, there's similar beliefs and similar ethos again. I think a lot of Scotland working class and people who are happy to, are funny people and happy to have a laugh about themselves. There's a lot of similarities between Scousers and Scottish people, and obviously, people like Bill Shankly help that, and you want to come and play with your compatriots. Even Andy Robertson, who came, recently, he was saying how great it was for him to speak to Kenny Dalglish. He just wanted to play with, the former Scottish legends. We've had probably the best ever Scottish player, which is Kenny Dalglish. So any Scottish kid now, their dads or their granddads will have known Kenny Dalglish, and whenever they go, they'll go, I'll make sure you say hello to him. So it just, obviously, that's the relationship, and it goes all the way back to Billy Lidell. Scottish lads then saw him playing for the national team and thought, I want to come and play with him in Liverpool, and that's just what it is. It's just obviously we've managed to have the best. That's what helps.
Oh, that's incredible. And how was Billy's childhood being a son of a miner? How was his choice for football?
Yeah, well, because he was good at it. I think it's probably the easiest thing. But yeah, his granddad played, like, he wasn't a good player, but his granddad played like amateur football, and he could see that as, that Billy had talent. So he wanted to encourage him, and he used to offer him money for each goal that he scored. So obviously, going back many years, but he gave him like 2p for a goal. So every time he scored, he was getting 2p. And he went through like a drought. He didn't score for 10 games. So his granddad was, okay, I'll give you double if you score. And then whether Billy just wasn't playing well or was trying to hoodwink his granddad, he then scored 9 goals in the next game. So his granddad had to give him, he had to give him 4p per goal for all 9 goals. He nearly bankrupted his granddad. So I think having such a supportive family around him who all love football, he used to watch Dunfermline one week, and then all of his family would travel to Carlton-Beath, who were like their rivals. And they go and watch it with their cousins in Carlton-Beath, so they'd always be watching football, be playing in the streets. So I think it was just, he was encouraged from a young age, and he went to quite a good school who also encourages football. So he basically just had a good supportive family around him, and he got access to some of the best football facilities, a child in Dunfermline could in 1930s, but he was still better than what a lot of his peers would have had. And obviously he was good at it as well, which is why he did so well.
Billy played rugby too. How was his final choice for Liverpool and in football?
Yeah, I think he didn't really enjoy rugby. I think is what he said. He more had to do it. He played, he did athletics, he played rugby, and he played cricket. But his love was football. It always had been. As I say, they were a football family, so he always wanted to play football. So it was obvious he was going to have a career, and he had Man City, Arsenal, Partick Thistle were all coming and watching him. And it was because of Manchester City going to watch them that Matt Busby, who obviously went on to manage Manchester United, he heard about a scout going to watch Billy Lidell and said, I want to. He wanted to try and make sure that Liverpool heard about him because he was playing for Liverpool at the time, Matt Busby. So he called up George Kay, who was the Liverpool manager. They sent a scout down, and basically the main reason that Billy Lidell came to Liverpool was because they had a job in accountancy for him. So obviously they were only semi-professional at the time. It wasn't a high-paid job, but the Liverpool promised they'd give him a house and they'd give him a job as an accountant, and that was all his mum and dad wanted. He could play football, have a job, and have a house, and that was the main reason they were willing to risk a house and a job on him to make him play, and it obviously all worked out.
And as an historian, do you ever work on Lidell's experience during World War II in your work?
Yeah. So I've got a chapter on the war and wartime football. I think a big thing with Billy was he didn't really like talking about the war. He wasn't like, it was something he kept quiet from his family and his friends. He never wanted to discuss the fact he battled in World War II. It wasn't something he enjoyed talking about. But I think it's just an interesting period of history, as you say, as a historian, because basically wartime football is just wiped from history. No one talks about it. No one acknowledges it. But the players were playing football at the risk of getting bombed literally while they're playing. All the fans who were going were also risking getting bombed and attacked. But they were still happy to do it because it brought the community together in a time when they needed to be, uplifted and looking after each other. So it was dangerous, but also it's been ignored, which, as I say, I think is quite sad. But yeah, there is a whole chapter on it in the book, and it's amazing how he bounced around from club to club, city to city, and still managed to play football. And as I said, at a very dangerous time. It is interesting going to football history as well.
And how did the war change football in England? And how did Liverpool restructure after the clash, after the war? How was this return structured?
Yeah, so obviously the war ended in September 1945. And obviously normally the season starts in August. So what the FA did was they said to everyone that whole season, so from September to July, still wouldn't count. It's still wartime football, and they started again in August 1946. So they basically had a full year to get themselves ready for the season. And what Liverpool did, which was better than everyone else, because obviously Liverpool won the first league after the war. Liverpool took all the players and they went to America because there was no rationing, and obviously the weather's better, there's better food available, and basically just put them all on the ship. They all went to America and had a good pre-season. And what it did was it made them physically fit, but they were allowed to eat the nutrients that basically the other teams weren't eating. They were all on bread and water and rations. So because the Liverpool players had such a good summer, it put them in good stead for the rest of the season. And there was a bad winter in 1946, so the season didn't finish till July. So they needed to be physically fit to make it through the season. And because of that pre-season tour in America, I think that's why Liverpool did so well compared to everyone else. And that's why they won the league that season as well, really, I'd say.
Lucas, sua vez.
Bom, eu queria perguntar para o Kenny qual foi, assim, qual foi o maior desafio, a maior dificuldade que ele teve em produzir o livro, assim, sobre o Billy Lidell?
Peter, what was the most challenging for you during the writing of his book?
Most people are dead. So basically everyone who you want to speak to has died quite a while ago, so it's quite that's a bit annoying, but yeah, really it's just, let's say, at the time difference really, because he would have been 100 in January this year, January 2021. That's why the book's coming out. It would have been his 100th birthday. So a lot of the people who were his age or similar, who really appreciated the start to the end of his career, aren't around anymore. So it's just hard getting to speak to people, because I wanted it to be the voice of the fans. I don't want it to be me just, reading from a newspaper and saying, oh, they won 1-0, then they won 2-0, then they lost 4-0. I didn't want to write that. I wanted it to be a chat with someone and it was their story. So it was just trying to make sure that I got through to people. And so that meant I had to try and get hold of people that didn't want to be got hold of. So I was like writing letters, writing emails, phone calls, just trying to track people down. And I spoke to Doug Cowie, who he played for Scotland with Billy, but he's 92, I think, at the moment. So I had to call his son. His son had to handwrite all his dad's answers out because his hearing was so bad, and then send it back to me, and I had to type it all up. So see, that was from that's how hard it was to speak to people who had first-hand account with them. So I think it's just trying to make sure I gave the right story, by the people who actually knew him. That was, hard, but hopefully I've done it as well.
And how was Lidell's period in Canada?
Yeah, so obviously he was training during the war. So he was there for quite a while, but with in England, he could play for other clubs. So as I say, he played for Chelsea and he played for other teams, and he could be Billy Lidell. He could be, he didn't have to be pretend he was someone else. But in Canada, he had to go under a pseudonym, so he had to call himself Bill Tanner. So he used to have to lie to be able to play on the pitch. So he'd say, "Oh, do you mind if I can play football?" And they say, "Yeah." They put him on. "Is it you any good?" He's like, "I'm all right." Went on and he scored 4 goals in the first 20 minutes. So it was obvious he wasn't Bill Tanner. He was quite a good player from England. So I think he enjoyed it because he obviously did a lot of learning RAF wise, a lot of training. But it would have been frustrating because he wanted to play football. That was his passion, and it was getting taken away from him really, obviously with the war. So I think it was a balance of being able to play, but obviously people were questioning him. But he obviously learned a lot, and it was really important for what he did as a navigator in the RAF. It was important that he got that training really.
And Lidell started early at Liverpool, but only made his debut was in 46. How was it for him player professionally only after the war?
Yeah, so obviously it wasn't his fault because he was 16 when he joined. Actually, that was in 38. So he was only there just over a year, and then the war started. So he was 17 years old, and then the war began. So you don't see many 17-year-olds today, playing for the first team. So that's what it was like with him. He was playing for the reserves. But it was 1 month after the war started. He actually did play for the first team, but as I say, it was in a wartime game, so they don't count. But he was really close to making his debut. It was just obviously the war interrupted. So that's why there was such a big gap between 38 and 46. But it's the same with Bob Paisley as well, because they both signed in 38 but made the debut against, it was the home debut in the league was against Chelsea when they won 7-4 in 1946. It was just because there was no official games for them. They played over 100 times for Liverpool in the meantime. It's just that none of them counted, so it's hard to fathom really. But obviously, I worked out if you added all his appearances and goals on, he'd be the top goal scorer today, and he'd be much higher up on the appearances. It's just because he lost that period of his life, which every footballer in that period did. But it was taken off them because of the war. But obviously, that's why there was such a big gap between signing and making his debut.
What was it like to win a championship, the first since 1923 for Billy, being a player already consolidated on the team?
Yeah, so it was an amazing season, really. With I think it was about 6-7 games to go. Liverpool were fifth, so it wasn't like they were storming ahead. It was a really tight league, and they just had to keep winning all the games and hoping that other teams around were losing. Everton did a big favour to Liverpool. They beat Wolves with a couple of games to go, which meant it was then in Liverpool's hands. So if Liverpool kept winning, they'd be fine. And the last game of the season, they did play Wolves and managed to get the win. But the season wasn't over because, as I said, there was such a bad winter. The season dragged on till July, and they had to wait another 2 weeks for Stoke to play their game against Sheffield United. And basically, they had to make sure they got the right results, and if it happened, they'd won. So it was a bit like when Man City played Chelsea a couple of years ago when Liverpool won the league. Obviously, because of that game, it would have been like that for the fans. They were all waiting for the results basically to see if they'd won the league, and it came through 2 weeks later. That finally, after all that waiting, say the season started in August, they had to wait until the July, the following year, after the war, after being in the pre-season tour. It'd been a mad season for everyone, and after all that time, they finally found out they'd won it. And obviously, it was Billy's only league title, but it was the most dramatic season I've ever. Like when I was writing it, I was getting nervous. It was just mad how big the games were. So I think obviously it's one to read. That chapter I think it is a good chapter in the book, because I think it just tries to hopefully shows how dramatic that season was.
Lidell was a very constant player on the team, playing in the championship and taking part in the tours. What was the league calendar like at the time?
Yes, obviously there was no Europe and there was no League Cup, so it was just a league and the FA Cup, which obviously makes them much more important, but obviously means he had less opportunity to play games. So when he got to, I think it was 58, it was the first time in 20 years he missed a game. So literally, he'd been injured and stuff, but he'd never ever been dropped. So the club had picked him solidly for 20 years. So that's how it shows how good he was, but shows that maybe the calendar wasn't as congested. They played a lot of football, and obviously they played in the week, midweek. The league was bigger, but obviously they weren't travelling as much really, so it was probably easier on the players in that sense. But I think in terms of the calendar, it just meant that the league and the FA Cup were really important. And then when they had the international games, they were even more important because they were only playing against like England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Ireland. They only really played each other. And then every summer they might go on tour and play other teams. So basically it was more, every game seemed to have more importance because the league was massive, the FA Cup was massive. And obviously his home international Scotland games, they were really big as well.
Daniel, chegou sua vez. Manda sua pergunta para eu traduzir para o Peter.
Então, eu queria perguntar para o Peter como que foi a relação do Lidell com a comunidade após ele se aposentar. Ele continuou morando em Liverpool e tudo mais. Como é que foi essa relação pós-aposentadoria com a comunidade ali da região?
Peter, how was Lidell's relationship with the Liverpool community after his retirement?
Yeah, so he wanted to be involved in the club. He wanted to he wanted to be a director. So he wanted to join the board and represent them. And obviously, he'd had a career as an accountant, so he was clever. You know, he knew his way around the boardroom. It wasn't just he was a football player. He was intelligent as well. So he wanted to be able to help the board in that sense. So unfortunately, after his application, he wasn't approved, which is much like what happened with Bill Shankly. He also wanted to be wanted to be on the board as well. So I think for them it was unfortunate since the club didn't really give him the chance to continue his relationship with Liverpool. But yeah, I think for the fans, they all loved him. He used to still go to every game, and they'd all wait. So there was always a thing that he'd sit in the main stand, and the cop would wait for him to come out. And obviously, this was like a few years after he retired. He'd come out, give a little sheepish wave, and all the cop would cheer and clap him and all that stuff. They still loved him so much, and obviously he loved them. He never left Liverpool, never went back to Scotland. He stayed in the city, went to watch them every week. And you know, speaking to Alan Hansen as well, he was saying that after the games he'd come and sit in the players' lounge, and he'd love to be able to talk to the young players and just try and encourage them and just try and put them in the right path. He was never someone who would who would show off, but he'd have a nice chat with someone and just try and encourage them to keep going. And obviously, because he loved Liverpool so much. And I think if you're watching 1994, the last game of the Cup, against Norwich, when they had all the old players come on the pitch, and Billy got to come on then. He wasn't very well at the time. He obviously had dementia, and the illness was starting to take hold of him, but he managed to get on the pitch and the cop sang his name. And I think that was a really pivotal moment to show, how important he'd been, because it was before the crowd used to sing. So for them to have the opportunity to give him a cheer, sing "There's Only One Billy Lidell," and give him a clap, I think that was a really fitting way to end his relationship with the club, because they got to say thanks to him. And it's really good that they got that opportunity to say thank you.
It was a really fantastic atmosphere. Peter, Lidell was a player who was in all positions on the pitch because of injuries from the other teammates. Was he our Milner from the past?
Well, I think it's good. It's a fair point, because he was part-time, so he worked as a footballer and accountant, but they give him his accountancy job and let him have July off so he could do pre-season with Liverpool, and everything else he'd still be part-time. But his fitness was unbelievable. He only trained 2 days a week. Everyone else trained 5, but he was as fit as everyone. He kept up with everyone in front of the running and everything. He played every week, and he played football for many years afterwards. Played squash, golf, everything you wanted to play. He was always with his sons running about. So yeah, James Milner is not a bad comparison, because he was just his longevity of his career is testament to how fit he was. And he retired when he was 38, which made him he's still Liverpool's oldest ever goal scorer. I know that's the 60s. If you think today, another 60 years on top of sports science or the technology they've got, he could have played into his 40s easily. It's just he was so fit and so versatile, as you say. He played in every position because he was big, strong, quick. He was just the perfect player, and obviously Liverpool were lucky to have him, and they're lucky to have James Milner as well.
He's definitely our Milner on the past. And Peter, the Cup has a very strong and grateful relationship with the club idols. How did Lidell's retirement and then her death feels to the Cup? And how does Cup eternalize the idols?
Yeah, so obviously his retirement got testimonial. So obviously that's the club and all the fans could say thank you to him. And he was the first player, and I think in about 30, 40 years, to have a testimonial at Anfield at the time, which obviously showed how long he'd played there for and how much they loved him. And as I've said, he was only a part-time player, so the money from the testimonial bought him a house. So it it wasn't like today where it all goes to charity. It went to him, and he needed that money to be able to live out the rest of his life. And the funds from it literally bought him a house in Eggborough. So he did really well out of it. And obviously he was thankful that they could all turn up because it was really bad weather. It was raining. Stanley Matthews pulled out, so Billy Lidell had to play for the other team on his day. He was playing for the away side. But they were still obviously all happy to see him and cheer him on. And yeah, unfortunately, he, as I said, he got dementia and he died in 2001. But he'd been ill for such a long time, about 20 years he had the illness. So he'd slowly, backed away from public life. So people hadn't really seen him in a while. And also he died in the July. So obviously we're going to see at the pre-season friendly this weekend, Michael Robinson's going to get a tribute and stuff. And we've had the Ray Clements thing last season, Gerard Houllier. I think, unfortunately, if you die in the summer as a footballer, it's hard for the fans to be able to give the tribute you deserve, really. So I think, if it had been in the middle of a season, I think there definitely would have been more done in terms of the club, obviously, like black armbands, programs, stuff like that, which I think is what he deserved. But it's hard to know when to do it. So, hopefully, when it is his 100th birthday, the club can do something then, just to say again, thank you. It's January next year, so hopefully they can do something just to thank for how much he did. And he lives on today through his banner, the big flag in the Kop, which I was lucky enough to go and hold the other week. So I went to Anfield and we got the flag out. And it's on the Kop. It was on there all last season. We watched it. It was just to the right of the goal, block 204, where my dad sits. There's a big flag, and it's testament that it's so long ago he stopped playing. He died, when I was 6. A lot of people won't have heard of him or might not know him, but his flag's still there. That's how important he is to the club. Liverpool don't forget their idols. They don't forget the people who did so much for the club. As I said, there's those 7 benches. You see the Shankly gates, the Paisley gates. We've got that wall now, which has obviously got Ronnie Moran on it. All the flags every week. Liverpool FC and Liverpool, the fans, really appreciate their history. And I think it's testament that, as I say, such a long time ago, but he's still important to the club and his flag's still there today.
And Peter, how was Lidell's move to Colombia?
Yeah, well, it was a bit like, say, the MLS or the Chinese Super League. It was a bit like that. So basically, Colombia pulled away from FIFA, as I'm sure you might know, and they basically just said, we don't care about the rules of the caps. There was the wage caps and the foreign players. They just said, don't worry, we'll just pay you whatever you want and we'll get the best players. So obviously they had Alfredo Di Stefano, they had him come over, and they had a few English players, and they wanted Billy Lidell to be one of them. Obviously, again, showing how important he was at the time, but he was happy at Liverpool and he didn't want to go. So obviously it was to Bogota, the Santa Fe, the club who wanted him, but he just didn't want to leave. So he was so loyal to Liverpool. He was playing in the 2nd division, part-time player. We'd only been getting £20 a week, but he was offered to go out to Colombia, as much money as he wanted, and play out the rest of his career. But he loved Liverpool too much. But it would have been good for them. But thankfully for us, he stayed loyal and stayed at Liverpool.
Daniel, sua vez de perguntar.
Aproveitando que a gente está com um torcedor local, né, para perguntar pro Peter como que ele vê a passagem dos brasileiros pelo clube, Fabinho, Alisson, Nino, Coutinho, Lucas Leiva, Fábio Aurélio e tudo mais.
Peter, how is your point of view about the Brazilian players, Firmino, Alisson, Lucas Leiva, Coutinho, Fabinho?
Yeah. Well, I've got Alisson there, so I like him. Got him on my shirt. It's got my Brazil top 4. Yes, well, they are. I don't mind them. But yeah, I think for me, I think the first one I really remember coming was Lucas. And I think everyone loved him so much because he really understood the fans as well. He sounds Scouse now when he speaks, and he understands Liverpool. He went through such a hard time, and the fans. I don't think they turned on him as much as people say, but he wasn't getting a good time. He wasn't always playing. Obviously when he came on the derby for Gerrard. And then obviously that one, Phil Neville saved it on the line. I think it was tough for him because he was seen as like, oh, is he going to be trying to take over Gerrard's spot? But I think once people realised he was more of a number 6 and he could make the position his own, and he fell in love with Liverpool and the fans fell in love with him, I think, which is what made it such a good bond. And obviously it was him, he was there when Coutinho came and Coutinho scored some great goals. And that one, I'll always remember that one against Man City when he scored and we nearly won the league that season. And I was on the Kop then, and that was unbelievable. And obviously, if it wasn't for Coutinho, we wouldn't have the team we've got today, would we? Wouldn't have been able to buy Alisson and Van Dijk and everything. So that's what's helped. And I think to have the 3 there now, and obviously Alisson and Fabinho just signed a new contract, which is great. And I think, for me, I don't know how many more years he's going to be there, but I think obviously with Alisson and Fabinho, we're in good hands with the Brazilians. So send any more over. You got any more good ones?
Peter, Liverpool fans have already valued players who give themselves on the field and sometimes are not so talented. Billy was a loyal player, a very loyal player, and who was in the first period of rebirth, the club, the returning of Liverpool in the league. How is this fan idolatry with the loyalty of players?
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, fans are loyal. They go every week. We pay 40, 50 pounds, or it wasn't that much then, but you pay a lot of money and you go every week and you want to see something back. I don't see Liverpool lose a game and then just go, I'll go and support someone else. We stay loyal, so I think that's why fans appreciate it when players do. You want them to feel like the badge on their shirt is important to them. So I think when they do that, that's why you get treated so well. Michael Owen, probably the best example. He could have left Liverpool, gone to Real Madrid, not come back and still had a good relationship, but he went to Man United, so no one's gonna like him. And that's what it is. You've got to feel like, it means something to you, but it's not just, you don't play here for 2 years, go somewhere else and then just forget about us. That's not what you do with Liverpool. It's not what you do with anyone. So I think with Billy, they saw he loved Liverpool. That's why he stayed there so long, and that's why you respect him. People like Lucas, he left. Lucas Leiva left how many years ago now? Like 5 years, probably 4 or 5 years. But people still like him because he obviously respected Liverpool enough to not join a rival, not join another team. He's gone abroad, carried on his career. I think if you just show that you've listened to the fans and that they mean a lot to you, I think that's what helps. So I think that's why Billy got on so well with them.
Peter, the question is unavoidable. How the Liverpool fans felt having several loyal idols in the bad times, in the bad phase of the club, when they saw Coutinho's forces departure? How it was for the Kop?
What was that? Sorry, just said it broke up then. Sorry.
What? I don't understand.
Sorry, will you say that again? Sorry, it broke up. Oh. Sorry.
How the Liverpool fans felt having several loyal idols in the bad phase, the bad times of the team, when they saw Coutinho's forced departure?
So with Coutinho, sorry, yeah. Yeah. So I think, obviously, when he joined Barcelona, I saw on his like, when they did the video when he just a medical and all that, he was watching the Liverpool game when he did it, and I think I do think he loves Liverpool. I do think that, and I trust Jurgen Klopp, and he said that the only team he wanted to go to was Barcelona, and that team came in for him. It was the same with what happened with Luis Suarez. They both hold Barcelona to high esteem. I think a lot of South American players who come, their end goal is always Real Madrid or Barcelona, and it's not always Liverpool, but obviously a lot of the times it can be a step towards them. So I think, for me personally, just me as a Liverpool fan, I think I sympathise with Coutinho because I think he wanted to go to Barcelona, but it hasn't worked out for him. But that's not his fault. That's not our fault. We got a lot of money for him, and we bought a team that was better than the team with him in it. So, if he wanted to come back, I'd have him back, but I wouldn't spend stupid money on him. But, it's not, I don't think it's his fault that it hasn't worked out, and it's definitely not our fault. But, he might be the next Messi now, he's going anyway, so we'll see what happens.
Lucas, chegou sua vez.
Bom, eu, como estava já no assunto sobre lealdade, permanecer no clube, a perseverança do Lidell, eu queria saber, assim, do Peter, o que ele acha qual seria a maior importância, o maior impacto dos jogadores, para os jogadores na história do Lidell, não somente dos jogadores que chegam, mas os jogadores mesmo da base, até mesmo que estão começando agora no profissional, como o próprio Curtis Jones, o Harvey Elliott, que também deve estar figurando por essa temporada no time principal do Liverpool. Qual seria a maior importância da história do Lidell para esses jovens?
Peter, how important is Lidell's history to the club's base, to the juniors, for players like Kurt Jones, Trent Alexander-Arnold? How much important is the Lidell's history for these players?
Yeah, well, I think obviously I'm a little bit older than Trent and Curtis Jones, but I'm 26, so they're like 22, 17, 18. So I think for me, before I wrote the book, I knew the name Billy Lidell, but I didn't know much else about him. I knew he played for Liverpool. Liverpool was the name of the team, and I know he was really important, but I didn't know much else. So I suspect for them it'd be the same. They definitely would have heard of who he is. They'll probably appreciate that he was an important player, but they wouldn't know maybe necessarily why he was so loved and why he was so important. I think hopefully, I don't want to sound like I keep plugging it, but hopefully that's what this book will do. Young people who love Liverpool but know the name but want to know more about him. Hopefully this helps, because he was a really important part of the history. And as I say again, those 7 benches, if you know Gerrard, Kenny Dalglish, Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, you probably know John Barnes. So there's only 2 there that you won't probably know is Elijah Scott and Billy Lidell. I think it's important to get to know both of those players, because they were really important for the history of the club. So I think Curtis Jones and Trent Alexander-Arnold will probably know who he is, but they won't know much more than he played for Liverpool. So hopefully this will help explain why he's so loved and why he's so important.
Peter, Lidell was appointed just of the peace in Liverpool and has always been involved in social causes. How is this relationship of players, especially from Liverpool players, with the local community?
Yeah, well, I think, again, Liverpool is so important because a lot of the time Liverpool wasn't the most prosperous city, and it wasn't the most financially stable at the time. And when Billy came before the war, they just started to get more housing and stuff in the city, which is what convinced his parents to make him come here, because the Liverpool was on the up. And obviously then the war then really hurt the city, because obviously it was bombed a lot, being the port and all that. And then with the miners' strikes and the closing of the docks and all that in the 70s and 80s, Liverpool was hit again. But that's when the best teams were, when the city was at its worst. So I think the reason that Liverpool so passionately supported is because football means so much in the city, because a lot of the times in history it was the only release from what was going on and what wasn't a good situation for a lot of the people in the city. So I think the Liverpool fans really passionately support the club because of what's going on around the club at the time. I think when the players buy into that again, when as a fan you want to play for Liverpool, and those 11 people on the pitch are living your dream. So you just want to make sure that they're doing what you do. And you don't want them to go and live in a mansion in Manchester or something. You want them to be in the city. You want them to spend time with the fans, and you want them to understand, there's food banks at Anfield, because the city, not all over the city is lucky enough to have food and everything they need, on tap. And that's because of a lot of reasons, and we won't go into it. But for any player that understands that, how important it is to look after your fellow man. It doesn't matter how much money they've got, or you're one of the most prosperous people in the city, and if you can look after the fans, then you'll be a hero forever. So I think, that's what Billy did. He did a lot of work in the community, whether as a justice of the peace, where he was like on courts and stuff. He worked for a lot of like children's charities, and he did a lot of like the boys clubs, they were called. So it'd be like scouts and charity trips. He'd help kids in the local area. So you can see that it meant a lot to him to look after people, and that's why people will like him so much as well.
And how do you, Peter Kenny, how do you see Lidell's legacy in Liverpool's history?
Yeah, well, he's one of the best players to ever play for the club. That's what it is. I think everyone who's seen him play, every single person has said it's Billy Lidell, Steven Gerrard, Kenny Dalglish. They're the three players, the best players to ever play for Liverpool. I haven't seen him play. You haven't seen him play, but I think you've got to listen to people who say that, because they've had the fortune to watch those three players play week in, week out. For me, it's Steven Gerrard, but I've never seen Kenny Dalglish play, and I've never seen Billy Lidell. So you've got to listen to your dad, you've got to listen to your granddad, you've got to listen to what they say. And I think, his legacy and his importance is that he's one of the best players to ever play for the club. He spent so many years there. He gave his life to stay at Liverpool. You've just got to respect the fact that he was so loyal and so good. Those two things don't normally go together, but that was it.
And Peter, a sad question. I can tell about this. How was Lidell's relationship with Liverpool after Hillsborough? Did something change in this relationship after that day?
Yeah, well, let's say it was some of the family aren't sure if it was then or before, but obviously he had dementia and battling with Alzheimer's disease. So apparently when he was watching, because he was at Hillsborough, apparently when he saw it happen, he was just reading the programme. He wasn't computing what was happening. So his family were worried about the fact he wasn't processing, watching people die in front of him, which obviously there's no right or wrong way to do it, but he just didn't seem to understand what was happening. Obviously, it was 5 years later is when he came out on the pitch at Anfield. That shows how ill he was, at that time. But yeah, obviously, I think that started the real alerts, towards the family that he wasn't well. And, it's a lot to do with the leather footballs they were using and putting their head in the way. And it was on a wet and cold day, the ball would be 3 times heavier than it normally would be. So there's one game I wrote about, I can't remember who it was against, but Billy blocked a cross with his head. It took him out. He was on the floor. He couldn't walk straight for the rest of the game. He was stumbling everywhere. But it's just, get up and play on. Be a real man. But that's what ultimately killed him, because he was being a real man and he was putting his head in the way of these heavy balls. But I think obviously he had dementia and he had the saddest end to life. It's not a good illness. It's not what anyone should be subject to. It's one of the worst things you can have. I think. But I think there needs to be more accountability from the FA and FIFA, just to say, we're sorry that we made you play with these balls for 20, 30 years, and a lot of people have got this illness. I think it's really sad that there hasn't been enough accountability or apologies or anything to say it was their fault that all these people got this illness, and that's why so many of them died of it.
And Lidell played with Puskas in a social cause. Tell us how it was for the city.
Yeah, so it was a charity match, again, just basically for a number of local charities. So it was like the hospitals, the boys' clubs they support, and a bit of everything really. And they wanted a local hero, so Billy Lidell, and they wanted an international hero. So they tried to get Pele, but Pele didn't want to play because he was only 26, I think, at the time, or maybe a bit older. Pele, so he couldn't make it. So they asked Puskas. I think he was 40, but he was still playing for Real Madrid. So they asked him to come and just surprisingly, he said, yeah. He said, if you pay for me plane tickets there and back, I'll play. So he turned up and, no, one sec, sorry. Alexa. Oh, sorry. That was my alarm for R4 when it's supposed to be on. Do you want me to start that again? Is that easier or?
I
Do
don't
you want me to
understand.
start? Do you want me to start that answer again, or do we just carry on?
No.
No, just go. Okay, sorry. Okay, so sorry, yeah. So so obviously they have Puskas, who was 40 at the time, playing for Real Madrid, and they just got a lot of mainly ex Liverpool and Everton players to come and play, and so basically it was just to raise money in the local area, and a lot of current and ex Liverpool players played. Obviously, there's a plaque today. Liverpool South Parkway train station is where the stadium used to be, and there's a plaque today of Billy Lidell and Puskas still on there now. So it was a momentous occasion for the city, really.
And tell us about the Lidell's memorial. Who came up with the idea, and how did society receive this memorial from a player who defended Liverpool's colors with so much love and so much power?
Yeah, so it was some supporters really who realised he hadn't been properly remembered. Probably the right way to say it. So they started the Billy Lidell Memorial Group, and basically it was just a few people on the internet who just said, we should honour the fact, he was so important. There's nothing there, and especially in Town Hill in Fife, Dunfermline in Fife, sorry, where he's from. He thought, there was no recollection of how big he was. So it was such a small village, and how big he went on to be in Liverpool. So they basically just put it in the media, kept sharing it about, and led up to, I think it was in 2010, maybe a few years before. There's like a memorial with a plaque on, and it's got a whole playing ground. So it's got like a swimming bath. It's got like the park just around there, basically. But yes, it was just a nice way to remember him, and obviously, again, it shows a lot of people want to try and honour as many people as they can, but it was nice that so many people got behind it and made it a reality. So it's nice that it still stands there today, and again, a testament to how important he was.
And Peter, a nice question now. We can expect this book in Brazil?
Yes. So it's on Amazon, WH Smith. I don't know what else you can use on, but if you go on my website, I can post it out to you. So I've done, I've set up my own website and my own thing to sell it off. So I don't know if you can share the link, or if you go on my Twitter and my Instagram, Peter Kenny Jones, it's on there. And yeah, so I'll post it out anyway. Anyone who wants to buy it, and I've got I can sign it as well, and whatever else you'd want from me, just send me a message, and it's all on the website. But I say, yeah, I'll post it to you. You get in touch. If not, it'll be on Amazon, or I think a lot of other websites you'll be able to find it.
I'm in this pre-order.
Good.
Daniel, sua vez de perguntar.
Então, aproveitar que estamos com o torcedor de lá, então, para saber mais ou menos qual a expectativa dele para essa temporada agora, que vai começar, temporada 21-22.
Peter, how is your expect from this league, about Liverpool, about our teammates, 21-22? How is your expect about the league and about the Champions League, about the FA Cup?
Oh, for this season?
Yeah, for this season.
Yeah. Well, I think Van Dijk's back, so that's important. I don't know. I want to do well. Hopefully, win something. I think I think we're in the title race with Man City. I think if we're involved in it much more than we were last year, I think that'd be important. And hopefully win a cup. It'd be nice to win the FA Cup or League Cup. We haven't won them in a while. It'd be nice to win one of them, but I'd rather go further in the Champions League. So we have to prioritise that. That's fine. But yeah, I just want the fans back and the game to feel normal again. Just to be able to go and enjoy it. And I'll be on the Cop first game of the season against Burnley, and I can't wait for that really. So I just want us to do well, and whether that means we win something or we come second or we get to a final. I just want a good season where no injuries, and we're back. That's all I want to be, just back on the Cop and back supporting Liverpool. That's all I want to do.
And Peter, it's a private question. We are unfortunately coming to the end of this interview, but I wanted to ask you something more private. I knew Liverpool in Brazil. I got love about Liverpool in Brazil, seeing a tribute to Hillsborough. And how do you feel knowing that Liverpool pushes boundaries with the team? How do you feel about this Liverpool over country?
Yeah, so I love it. I think it's amazing that there's people all around the world want to support. I feel like it's my team because I live here, but I feel like it's all of our team. But it's just amazing that it's only 20 minutes from my house, Anfield, and I've been going there all my life. But I think for people all around the world to want to be part of this club, I think it's amazing. I really like it. I think there's a lot of people who don't like the fact that tickets don't go to local fans and that there's people coming from around the world and taking tickets and stuff. But I think as long as you're a proper Liverpool fan and when you go to the game, you want to watch it, you sing all the songs, you wear a Liverpool shirt, you just want to be part of it. And then I don't mind anyone. It doesn't matter where they're from or whether they're from Mars or whether they're from Liverpool. Doesn't bother me. Just as long as we all support the same team and all have the same ethos and belief, they work hard, work together, support the team, and then I think why not? The more the merrier. If we can get 200,000 in the ground and they're all from around the world, I don't mind. As long as they all support Liverpool.
And one last question. Our members, Orlando and Rodrigo, are not today to ask you something. Then they ask me, please ask Peter about this. What is the atmosphere? How is the atmosphere in the Anfield Road in the Liverpool games? And how did you feel about this 4-0 against Barcelona?
Well, I was there, so I was at the ground. I was.
Oh my God! Oh yeah, my God!
Unbelievable! Yeah, it was. So I think obviously I believed we would win. I thought we'd do it. I was saying Divock Origi hat trick. I was saying it all day. Obviously he only scored 2, but I just had a feeling he was going to do something and it was going to be a massive game. And then Wijnaldum, when he scored that second goal, it was just mad. I stood on my chair. I was obviously going mad, and then I jumped about 5 rows down, jumped onto someone's back, and it was the best day, the best moments in my life is that goal. Wijnaldum's goal, because I think the Origi one was a bit, or what's happening, but Wijnaldum's header, the second one, it was unbelievable, and that's why you go, that's why you go to the match. I haven't got married, I haven't had children, so I can't say compare them to those things which everyone seems to like, but my dad's always said you can never recreate the moment of a goal going in. He said when your kid's born or when you're married, you don't go like, you're happy, but you don't do that reaction. So it's just every single person, there's 50, 60,000 people all doing the same thing. Just that explosion of reaction. And it's just, it's incomparable. It's moments like Barcelona or the Dortmund game and Lovren's header when I was there as well. And to the Coutinho one against Man City, Gerrard against West Ham, Gerrard against the Bilbao, all them, they're moments that live forever, and that's what you just want to be there. That's why you go every week in the hope that you're going to get to that one more moment like that, and it lives with you forever.
And about that corner, that Trent Alexander-Arnold corner.
Yeah, mad. It was just, I couldn't. It was one of them. You didn't really know what was going on, did you? Because it was like is he going to disallow it? Is he going to go to VAR? It was when you were looking left and right, but then it was like, oh my God, we scored, and it was just unbelievable. It was like the when Origi scored the one against Everton, and when Pickford hit off the bar and all that. It was one of them again where you're like, what's going on here? How are we going to win this? And then we just win it out of nowhere again. So yeah, unbelievable.
Billy, I have read about your book and would like to thank you very, very, very much for your presence, your joy in talking about Liverpool, and thank you for bringing our fans a little more about the Liverpool idols. I want a book about Gerrard, Ian Rush, Kenny Dalglish, Jamie Carragher. I expected that you could write some books about the Liverpool idols. The doors of Somos Liverpool are very, very open for you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's been great to see you all. And yeah, thanks for having me. And keep supporting the Reds from Brazil. Love it.
We are from Brazil, but we are Somos Liverpool. Eu agradeço demais a presença de vocês, agradeço muito o play neste episódio maravilhoso, e você que está assistindo pelo YouTube, está com a legenda aqui embaixo, não precisa me legendar em português, porque vocês conhecem minha voz, vocês sabem o que eu estou falando. Muito obrigado por toda a audiência, por estarem sempre conosco, e por favor, sigam o nosso lema, não nos deixe caminhar sozinho. Peter, you never walk alone.
Yes, I love it.
Hugs.